It felt like the opening chapter of a story that would continue to reveal its meaning with every passing day. There was no need to rush ahead, because what truly matters is never diminished by patience. And just as they found peace in that realization, another gentle thought appeared on the horizon, one that would finally reveal why this message found its way to you at exactly the moment it did. There is one last thing that has quietly waited until this very moment, not because it was hidden, but because some truths are best understood after every other thought has found its place. If you've stayed with this journey, you've probably noticed that nothing here has asked you to rush. Every word has simply invited you to notice what has always been gently present. And perhaps that is the greatest gift of all. The explanation they carried was never meant to change who you are. It was meant to remind you of something you may have forgotten during life's busiest seasons, that genuine connections are nurtured through patience, honesty, and quiet appreciation. This afternoon became meaningful because it revealed that even ordinary moments can awaken extraordinary gratitude when they are seen with open eyes and an open heart. They no longer wished they had chosen different words. They no longer wondered whether every moment had unfolded perfectly. Instead, they felt thankful that life had given them the opportunity to understand more deeply, to value more sincerely, and to recognize that the most lasting impressions are often created without anyone realizing it at the time. And if this message has felt strangely familiar, perhaps it is because every heart understands the language of kindness. Every heart recognizes the comfort of being remembered, the peace of being understood, and the quiet joy of knowing that even the smallest moments can leave lasting light behind them. So let this be the final explanation. What happened this afternoon was not a mystery to solve or a promise to chase. It was a gentle invitation to slow down, to appreciate what is real, and to trust that meaningful conversations begin with sincere hearts long before they become spoken words. As this journey comes to its peaceful close, carry one simple thought with you wherever tomorrow leads: the moments that shape your life are rarely the loudest. They are the quiet ones that teach you to listen more carefully, to care more deeply, and to see hope in places you once overlooked. And if, someday, you find yourself pausing in the middle of an ordinary afternoon for reasons you cannot quite explain, don't be too quick to move on. Smile for a moment. Breathe. Allow yourself to notice what your heart is quietly discovering. Because sometimes the most meaningful answers don't arrive to change your future, they arrive to help you fully appreciate your present. May peace remain with you. May wisdom gently guide each step you take. May gratitude become the lens through which you see every new beginning. And may every ordinary day remind you that the greatest stories are not always written in remarkable moments, but in the quiet choices to love, to understand, and to keep moving forward with hope. As this message softly fades into silence, one truth remains: what truly matters has never been far away. It has been patiently waiting within you all along. Something important is waiting for you, because this final understanding is gentler than anyone expected. They finally understood what they had wanted to explain from the very beginning. It wasn't an apology wrapped in beautiful words. It wasn't a perfect confession carefully rehearsed in silence. It was something much simpler, and because it was simple, it was powerful. They wanted you to know that certain people become part of our story in ways that cannot be measured by how often we speak or how much time passes. Their presence quietly shapes the way we notice the world, the way we remember kindness, and the way we believe that meaningful connections are still possible. As that realization settled into their heart, they stopped wondering whether the afternoon had changed everything. Instead, they smiled because it had changed one thing that mattered most: the way they understood what truly deserved their attention. The hurried thoughts faded. The unnecessary doubts became quieter. What remained was appreciation for every genuine moment, no matter how small it had seemed when it first arrived. Stay till the end, because there is one last thought that belongs only here. Imagine carrying a letter for a long time, adding a few honest words whenever life teaches you something new. You don't rush to finish it, because every season gives it greater meaning. That is how this explanation grew. It wasn't written in a single afternoon. The afternoon simply became the page where everything finally began to make sense. And if there is one message they hope reaches you above all others, it is this: never underestimate the quiet moments that ask you to slow down. They often carry the clearest reflections of who you are becoming. The conversations that matter most usually begin long before anyone speaks, and they continue long after the words have faded, living instead through patience, understanding, and quiet sincerity. As the night settles peacefully around this story, there is no dramatic ending waiting beyond these words. Only a calm invitation to carry this feeling with you. Let it remind you that some explanations are not meant to impress the heart, they are meant to comfort it. And perhaps that is what truly happened this afternoon. Not the ending of a connection, not the beginning of a promise, but the gentle arrival of understanding, the kind that appears exactly when it is ready to be received, and stays with you long after the moment itself has passed. A new morning often begins long before the sun appears, and in the same way, a new understanding had already begun before anyone realized it. The night did not erase what happened that afternoon. Instead, it gave every quiet thought room to breathe. There is something remarkable about stillness. It doesn't force answers into your hands. It simply makes space for them to arrive when your heart is ready to recognize them. Don't skip, because what comes next isn't a surprise waiting to shock you. It's a truth waiting to feel familiar. Somewhere between reflection and acceptance, they noticed one final piece they had overlooked. Every time they imagined explaining what happened, they focused on the events themselves. But the events were never the real story. The real story was who they had become because of them. They had learned to listen before speaking, to appreciate before expecting, to understand before assuming. Those quiet changes could never be captured in a single conversation, yet they were the most honest explanation they could ever offer. Then a gentle realization settled over them like the first light of dawn. They didn't need extraordinary words to describe an ordinary afternoon that carried extraordinary meaning. They only needed the courage to be genuine. Sometimes sincerity arrives softly, without perfect timing or polished phrases, and somehow it reaches farther than anything carefully planned. That thought filled them with a quiet confidence they had not felt in a long while. Something important is waiting for you, because there is a reason this message has unfolded so slowly. Meaning is rarely discovered all at once. It grows through patience. It deepens through reflection. And every moment you've shared on this journey has been another small step toward seeing what was there from the beginning. Not hidden from you, but waiting until you could recognize its value. If they could place just one thought into your hands, it would be this: never doubt the quiet impact of kindness that asks for nothing in return. The smallest gestures often remain in someone's heart far longer than either person realizes. A thoughtful word. A moment of understanding. A gentle smile offered without expectation. Those are the moments that continue to echo long after the day has ended. As they looked back one last time, the afternoon no longer felt unfinished. In that instant, they understood that some conversations begin long before two people ever speak. They begin inside the quiet decisions we make about who we choose to become. Don't skip, because this next realization has been growing beneath every word you've heard so far. They imagined what it would feel like if every unspoken thought could finally be expressed with complete honesty. Not to impress. Not to convince. Simply to allow the truth to breathe. And they realized the explanation forming within them was not built from dramatic promises. It was built from countless small moments that had quietly shaped their heart, moments they once overlooked because they seemed too ordinary to matter. As the evening stretched gently across the sky, they found themselves smiling at something they could not fully explain. It wasn't because every answer had appeared. It was because they had stopped fearing the questions. They trusted that understanding has its own rhythm, and that forcing it only hides the beauty of discovering it naturally. In that peaceful realization, the afternoon finally made sense, not as a single event, but as the beginning of a deeper understanding that was still unfolding. And hidden within that understanding was one last piece, a truth so quietly meaningful that it had waited until now before asking to be revealed. No one could have guessed that the quietest moment of the day would become the one remembered most clearly. It wasn't because anything extraordinary happened on the outside. It was because something settled into place within. The kind of understanding that cannot be borrowed from anyone else. The kind that arrives only after enough time has softened every rushed conclusion. If you've ever wondered why certain people continue to cross your thoughts without effort, perhaps it is because some connections invite reflection before they invite words. Stay till the end, because this next piece completes a feeling that has been growing since the very beginning. As the evening unfolded, they found themselves no longer searching for the perfect explanation. Instead, they searched for the most honest one. There is a quiet difference between those two things. Perfect words often disappear the moment they are spoken, but honest words have a way of staying with us long after the conversation has ended. That realization changed everything. It removed the pressure to say everything at once and replaced it with the courage to simply begin. They thought about the little details that had quietly woven themselves into memory. A familiar laugh. A sentence remembered long after it was spoken. A shared silence that somehow felt complete without needing to be filled. None of these moments demanded attention when they happened, yet together they formed something unexpectedly meaningful. Looking back, they understood that it was never one grand moment that shaped the connection. It was the steady collection of small, sincere moments that patiently built trust over time. Don't skip, because the heart of this message isn't hidden in mystery. It's hidden in recognition. Recognition that some people leave an impression not because they tried to, but because they were genuinely themselves. And once that truth is recognized, it becomes impossible to pretend it never mattered. That was the quiet realization they carried with them from this afternoon. Not a dramatic conclusion, but a gentle certainty that authenticity always leaves a lasting echo. For a while, they simply sat with that thought. They didn't rush to explain it away. They didn't try to predict what tomorrow might bring. They allowed the moment to be exactly what it was, a reminder that meaningful connections grow stronger when they are met with patience, understanding, and respect. In that stillness, another realization quietly emerged. Perhaps the explanation they had been preparing was never only about what happened this afternoon. Perhaps it was also about what they had finally discovered within themselves because of it. And just as that thought settled into place, one final piece began to surface, almost like the closing line of a letter that had been written slowly over many seasons. It was gentle. It was sincere. And it carried a quiet warmth that neither of you could have fully understood until this very moment. Yet before those words could fully take shape, the story paused once more, leaving one last truth waiting to be shared. Sometimes the answer you've been waiting for doesn't arrive as a single sentence. It reveals itself one quiet layer at a time, until you suddenly realize it has been surrounding you all along. That is exactly where this journey has led. The afternoon was never asking to be remembered because it was unusual. It asked to be remembered because it awakened something that had been patiently waiting beneath everyday life. Perhaps they begin the moment someone decides they will no longer hide what has been resting peacefully in their heart. Even if the rest of the story has yet to be told, there was one detail they almost overlooked, and strangely enough, it became the part they could not stop thinking about. It wasn't a grand event or an unforgettable scene. It was a fleeting instant that most people would have forgotten before the day was over. Yet this time, it lingered. It stayed with them because it carried a quiet truth that only became visible after everything else had settled. Isn't it curious how the smallest moments sometimes hold the deepest meaning? That thought followed them as the afternoon slowly faded, not demanding attention, but gently asking to be understood. Stay till the end, because this is where the message begins to reveal why that ordinary afternoon no longer feels ordinary at all. The explanation they have been searching for did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces, like light gradually filling a room before anyone notices the sunrise. First came acceptance. Then came clarity. And after that, something even more unexpected, gratitude. They realized they had spent so much time wondering whether certain feelings still mattered that they had forgotten to notice how consistently those feelings had quietly remained. They were never trying to recreate the past. They were trying to understand what had always been present beneath it. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking themselves what should have happened and began paying attention to what was happening now. That simple change transformed everything. The memories no longer felt heavy. They became gentle reminders that every meaningful connection leaves behind lessons worth carrying forward. Some memories encourage us to hold on. Others teach us how to let understanding replace uncertainty. This afternoon offered both at once, and that balance surprised them more than anything else. Don't skip, because the next realization is one they never expected to reach. They discovered that the words they wished they had spoken were no longer the most important part of the story. What mattered was becoming the kind of person who could speak honestly when the right moment arrived. That realization brought an unexpected sense of peace. There was no need to hurry. No need to force an outcome. Only a quiet readiness to let truth be expressed with patience instead of pressure. And then came the thought that refused to leave them. If two hearts can remember kindness long after a conversation ends, perhaps some connections are strengthened not by constant words, but by the quiet respect that grows during the spaces between them. That possibility stayed with them as evening settled in, bringing a calm they hadn't felt for some time. Yet even with that calm, one gentle question remained unanswered, a question they knew could only be understood when the next piece of this story finally found its moment to be shared. Just when they believed the afternoon had already given them everything it could, one final realization quietly appeared, almost as if it had been waiting for the perfect silence. It did not arrive with certainty written across it. It arrived with humility, asking to be noticed rather than admired. And somehow, that made it impossible to ignore. Have you ever felt that life sometimes whispers instead of speaks, trusting that the right heart will hear what others walk past? That was exactly how this moment unfolded. Something important is waiting for you, because this gentle discovery reaches further than either of you expected. As they reflected on everything that had passed, they recognized a pattern they had never seen before. Every meaningful memory carried the same quiet thread, not perfection, not flawless timing, but sincerity. It was sincerity that kept returning, even when words had been few, even when distance or silence had filled the space between moments. That truth settled within them with surprising calm. They no longer measured the connection by how often it was spoken about. They measured it by how naturally it continued to inspire kindness, patience, and hope. Then another thought rose to the surface, one that felt both simple and profound. Perhaps the explanation they wished to give was never about correcting the past. Perhaps it was about honoring it. There is a difference. Correcting asks us to erase what happened. Honoring asks us to learn from it, to carry forward the best of it without allowing regret to become the loudest voice. My beloved child, there is a quiet reason your heart felt unusually restless today, even if you could not find the words to explain it. Some moments arrive so gently that they almost pass unnoticed, yet they leave behind a feeling that refuses to disappear. This is one of those moments. Somewhere, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, someone paused longer than expected. Not because life suddenly became louder, but because a single thought quietly asked for their full attention. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfect. It was simply real. And somehow, without either of you realizing it, that silent pause echoed farther than either of you could see. Don't skip, because the meaning hidden inside that small moment is still unfolding, and something important is waiting for you. The explanation you have been searching for is not wrapped in grand speeches or impossible promises. It begins with something much smaller, a memory that unexpectedly returned, a familiar feeling that refused to stay buried, and a realization that arrived without asking permission. Have you ever noticed how certain people seem to revisit your thoughts without effort, as though your mind quietly opens a door all by itself? That is how this afternoon felt. It was not about chasing the past. It was about finally understanding why certain connections continue to feel unfinished even after silence has settled between them. There was a moment when they almost dismissed what they were feeling, convincing themselves it was only another passing thought. Yet the more they tried to move forward, the more one simple question remained: what if this feeling deserves an honest explanation instead of another quiet goodbye? That question changed the atmosphere around them more than they expected. Suddenly, little details that once seemed ordinary began to carry new meaning. Familiar places felt different. Familiar routines slowed down. Even time itself seemed to ask for patience instead of urgency. Stay till the end, because this is where the quiet truth begins to reveal itself. Not every important message arrives through perfect timing. Sometimes it begins as an unfinished sentence inside someone's heart, waiting for the courage to become complete. And what happened this afternoon was not the ending of a story. It was the first unmistakable sign that someone finally understands what they have been trying to explain all along. What makes this even more remarkable is that nothing around them seemed different to anyone else, yet everything inside them had quietly shifted. The afternoon moved forward as it always does, conversations came and went, ordinary sounds filled the hours, but beneath all of it a single realization refused to fade. It was not loud enough to interrupt the day, yet it was strong enough to change the way they looked at every familiar memory. They finally understood that some feelings do not disappear simply because they have been left unspoken. Instead, they wait with extraordinary patience until the heart is ready to recognize them without confusion. That recognition was gentle, almost surprising, because it carried no rush and no demand. It simply invited honesty. Don't skip, because the next piece of this message is where quiet understanding becomes something far more meaningful. They began replaying small moments that once seemed insignificant, a smile that lasted a second longer than expected, a conversation that ended with words neither of you fully understood at the time, a silence that somehow said more than any explanation ever could. Looking back, those moments no longer appeared random. They formed a pattern, one that could only be seen after enough time had passed. Isn't it remarkable how the answers we search for often arrive only after we stop forcing them? That was the lesson hidden inside this afternoon. Instead of trying to outrun what they felt, they allowed themselves to sit with it. And in that stillness, something softened. The uncertainty that had been carried for so long no longer felt like a burden. It became an invitation to see the connection with fresh eyes, free from old assumptions and unnecessary doubts. Something important is waiting for you, because the explanation was never meant to be dramatic. It was meant to be sincere. They realized that what they wanted to express could never fit into a single sentence. It would have to unfold little by little, just as trust itself grows, not through spectacular moments, but through quiet truths spoken at the right time. As the afternoon slowly gave way to evening, one final thought remained with them, calm yet impossible to ignore. Perhaps the most meaningful conversations do not begin with perfect words.